um, that doesn't know how to let it go.
I hope you're doing well by God's grace. Please, if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe and press the bell icon so you never miss the latest breaking updates from the world of reality TV drama. Today's story is perhaps the most shocking, the most disturbing, and certainly one of the most heartbreaking chapters in the ongoing saga of sister wives. A story not about property, not about jealousy between wives, not even about the collapsing dream of plural marriage, but about something much darker. At the very center of this storm stands Kody Brown, once a proud patriarch, now a man unraveling before our very eyes. And the spark that ignited his spiral? His reaction to seeing Aurora, Robyn's beloved daughter, falling in love with someone her own age. What began as a quiet, innocent romance has now torn open a wound so deep that it threatens to destroy what little remains of the Brown family. It started with whispers. A hug caught on camera. A moment that should have been sweet and unremarkable, but instead, it shattered Kody's fragile control. When cameras captured Kody storming out of Robyn's Flagstaff home after glimpsing Aurora and her boyfriend together, the internet exploded with speculation. But what fans didn't see, what the cameras barely hinted at, was just how emotionally tangled, how disturbingly intense, Kody's connection to Aurora had become over the years. For seasons, he has been praised and criticized for stepping into the role of father to Robyn's children. He legally adopted Aurora, Dayton, and Brianna, becoming what viewers thought was a loving savior figure. But behind the glossy surface of TLC's editing, insiders now reveal something different. Something more unsettling. Kody's attachment to Aurora went beyond fatherly affection. He would sit with her for hours, brushing her hair, telling her how much she reminded him of a younger Robyn. At first, it seemed sweet until it didn't. One former production assistant admitted, "At first, we thought it was tender. Then it got weird." And now, as Aurora blossoms into adulthood, finding happiness in the arms of her boyfriend Elijah, a quiet, respectful young man studying environmental science, Kody cannot handle it. When he saw them holding hands, just two young people in love, it triggered something primal, something jealous, something far darker than the role of a protective father. Crew members called it a nuclear meltdown. Kody stood in the doorway, trembling, muttering under his breath, "This isn't right." But what wasn't right, Kody? That your grown daughter is dating a boy her age? Or that you could no longer control the one child who never abandoned you? From that moment forward, Kody's behavior spiraled. Phone calls. Obsessive check-ins. Uninvited appearances. He reportedly followed Aurora and Elijah on a date, confronting them in a parking lot like a jealous rival, not a father. And Aurora, gentle, loyal Aurora, was left shaken to her core. It was like he didn't see her as a grown woman capable of making her own choices, a close friend confided. It was like he saw her as something that belonged to him. Kody's world turns upside down. Kody Brown, the patriarch who once believed he had complete control over his family, suddenly found himself shaken to his core. For years, he dictated rules, expectations, and ultimatums, believing that his children would always bend under his authority. But what he never expected was this: his daughter Aurora, once obedient and quiet, finally making her own choice. That choice? Dating a boyfriend. What should have been a simple milestone of growing up turned into a storm that ripped open the deepest cracks in the Brown household. Aurora steps into independence. Aurora had spent her entire life walking on eggshells. Under her mother Robyn's shadow and Kody's fiery temper, she grew up believing her worth came from obedience. She was taught that Kody's approval meant everything. But Aurora, like many young adults, wanted more. She wanted freedom, love, and the ability to live her own story. When she began seeing her boyfriend, she felt, for the first time, like she was breathing on her own, free from the suffocating grasp of her father's control. For Aurora, this wasn't rebellion. This was survival. Kody's explosive reaction when Kody discovered Aurora's relationship, his reaction was volcanic. His face turned red, his voice boomed through the house, and his fury made the walls shake. "How dare you betray me like this, Aurora? After everything I've done for you. After everything this family has sacrificed." But what had really been sacrificed? To Aurora, the real sacrifice had been her childhood, her individuality, her voice, all silenced under Kody's constant need to dominate. Aurora's calm defiance only fueled Kody's rage. In his mind, she was supposed to stay loyal, obedient, and unshaken. Instead, she stood tall, choosing her heart over his control. Robyn, torn between husband and daughter. Robyn, usually Kody's shield and enabler, was caught in the crossfire. She stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, watching the man she defended for years turn his anger on her daughter. "Please, Kody," she whispered. "She's just growing up. This isn't betrayal. This is life." But Kody didn't want to hear it. To him, Aurora's independence was not life, it was disobedience. It was rejection. It was proof that even Robyn's children, the ones he claimed to love above all others, were slipping away. For the first time, Robyn faced the impossible truth: she could no longer protect both her daughter and her husband at the same time. The moment Aurora was cast out, the shouting escalated. Aurora's boyfriend stood silently, refusing to back down but choosing not to ignite the fire further. Aurora's hands trembled, but her eyes did not. She knew this was the breaking point. And then, Kody said the words that shattered everything: "If you're going to choose him over this family, then you don't belong in this house anymore." The silence afterward was deafening. Robyn gasped, her sobs filling the room. Aurora's face turned pale, but she refused to bow. Slowly, she gathered her things, her boyfriend standing protectively by her side. For the first time in her life, she walked out, not as Kody's daughter under his command, but as Aurora, a young woman ready to live her own life. The fallout in the family: Kody's decision spread through the Brown family like wildfire. Christine's children were horrified. Janelle's kids, already estranged from their father, shook their heads in bitter recognition. Mary watched silently, realizing yet again that Kody's love was always conditional. To the rest of the family, Aurora's exile wasn't just about a boyfriend. It was about the core truth they all knew too well: Kody's love came with strings attached, and the moment you cut those strings, you were out. Aurora's new strength: though the separation was painful, Aurora found herself blossoming outside Kody's shadow. She experienced freedom, laughter, and unconditional love for the first time. Her story began to inspire not only her siblings but countless fans who had followed the family's journey. Viewers saw Aurora as a symbol of courage, proof that breaking free from control, even when it comes from a parent, can be the first step to healing. Kody, left alone with his regret. Kody, however, was left shattered. The very daughter he once held close, the one he favored and claimed as his own, had walked away. His heart wasn't just broken, it was exposed. He had demanded loyalty but destroyed the very bonds that could have held his family together. Late at night, when the shouting was gone and the cameras stopped rolling, Kody sat in silence, haunted by the truth: the more he clung to control, the faster his children slipped away. The fallout at home: the moment Kody's rage boiled over and Aurora stood her ground, the entire Brown household changed forever. The tension was no longer just between father and daughter, it spread like wildfire. Robyn, caught between her loyalty to Kody and her instinct to protect Aurora, became a broken figure in her own home. Her tears filled the silence after Kody's thunderous outburst, but Aurora did not falter. She had finally reached the point of no return, and her defiance pierced the very core of Kody's fragile authority. Aurora's decision to stay with her boyfriend shattered the illusion of control Kody had maintained for years. For the first time, one of his own children openly defied him, not with hesitation, but with strength and clarity. It was a declaration of independence, a refusal to be caged any longer by Kody's strict, selective rules. Kody's pride crumbles. Kody Brown had built his world on obedience. He demanded loyalty, respect, and submission, especially from his wives and children. But when Aurora rejected his demand to end her relationship, his pride cracked wide open. Kody was no longer the all-powerful patriarch he once imagined himself to be. Instead, he was a father who had lost the trust of his children, a husband whose love had turned into chains, and a man whose control slipped through his fingers every time one of his family members chose freedom over fear. This wasn't just Aurora dating a boyfriend. To Kody, this was betrayal. But to Aurora, this was liberation. Robyn torn in two. Robyn's sobs echoed through the house long after the confrontation. To her, Aurora's choice felt like abandonment. She had believed that by shielding her children within Kody's control, they would remain safe, protected, and loyal. But Aurora's courage shattered that illusion. Now Robyn faced the deepest wound of all, a daughter who chose her own heart over her mother's rules. Robyn begged Aurora to reconsider, her voice cracking under the weight of desperation. But Aurora stood tall. For once, she would not be defined by her mother's tears or her stepfather's anger. Robyn realized, in that agonizing moment, that the walls she had built to keep her children loyal to Kody had instead become a prison. And Aurora was the first to break free. The family shockwaves. Aurora's rebellion did not stay hidden within the walls of Kody and Robyn's house. News of the fight reached the other Brown siblings almost instantly. Christine's children were the first to rally behind Aurora, praising her bravery. They had seen for years how Kody's selective affection had wounded them, and Aurora's stand gave them hope that even Robyn's children, once seen as Kody's favorites, were no longer under his control. Janelle's kids, still grieving the loss of their brother Garrison, felt Aurora's pain deeply. They knew what it meant to fight for recognition in a family where Kody only gave love conditionally. Aurora's decision reminded them of their own battles with a father who had chosen control over compassion. Mary, quietly watching from the sidelines, felt a painful mix of grief and relief. For years, she had been dismissed, neglected, and cast aside by Kody. Seeing Aurora resist his dominance was both heartbreaking and healing. It was proof that even the children once protected by Robyn were beginning to see through the illusion. Kody's isolation. In the aftermath, Kody found himself more isolated than ever. His fury did not win Aurora back. His threats did not silence her. His authority no longer inspired fear, it only inspired rebellion. As days passed, Aurora moved further away from Kody's world. She sought comfort in her boyfriend, in her independence, and in the siblings who supported her. For the first time, Kody realized he was no longer the center of his family's universe. What once was a kingdom where his word was law had now become a broken house where his voice carried no weight. Aurora's strength becomes a symbol. Aurora's stand became more than just a teenage rebellion, it became a symbol for the entire Brown family. It was the moment the walls of control began to crumble. Her courage echoed through every corner of the family, to the wives who had once silenced their own voices for Kody's approval. To the children who had cried quietly, wondering why their father chose one household over another. To the viewers who had watched for years as Kody's power suffocated those around him. Aurora's strength was not just for herself. It was for everyone who had been silenced by Kody's control.
All right, Mary, welcome to Us Weekly. So excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling about this season? Obviously, there's definitely some tough.
The breaking point. Kody's anger boils over. The silence inside the house was suffocating. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo against the walls, magnifying the growing tension. Kody's jaw was clenched, his hands shaking, not from sorrow, but from a rage he could no longer contain. When Aurora stepped forward, her voice trembling yet steady with resolve, Kody's eyes narrowed. She confessed she had a boyfriend, a young man she deeply cared for, someone who treated her with kindness and respect. But instead of joy, instead of celebrating his daughter's steps into adulthood, Kody erupted like a storm. His voice thundered across the room, accusations laced with venom. "You've betrayed me. After everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me," he shouted. The words cut through Aurora like a blade, not because of the rejection, but because of the man standing before her, the father she once adored now replaced by a stranger who chose control over love. Aurora's strength in the face of rejection. Aurora's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to cower. She looked directly at Kody, her voice breaking yet powerful. "Dad, I'm not a child anymore. You can't dictate who I love. You can't control every choice I make." Her courage in that moment was breathtaking. For years, Aurora had been the quiet observer, often bending to please her parents, especially Kody. But now, the years of silence transformed into a strength she never knew she had. She wasn't just defending her relationship, she was defending her independence, her right to live as her own person. Yet, instead of hearing her plea, Kody turned colder. His words became final, merciless. "If you walk this path, Aurora, don't expect to come back into this house. You're no longer welcome here." Robyn's tears and helplessness as Kody spat those words, Robyn collapsed into tears. She rushed toward Aurora, gripping her hand tightly, begging both sides to reconsider. "Please, Kody, she's your daughter. Please don't do this. Aurora, don't walk away like this." But Robyn's voice, though filled with emotion, could not mend the fracture. For the first time, Aurora pulled her hand away from her mother's grasp. She was tired of being shielded, tired of being treated as fragile, tired of being caught in the middle of her parents' chaotic world. "Mom, I love you," she whispered, "but I can't let him control me anymore. This is my life." The shattering silence the house fell into a silence that was more deafening than any scream. Aurora picked up her bag, her heart pounding in her chest. Her siblings stood frozen, their faces pale with shock. No one dared to speak, no one dared to move, as Aurora slowly walked toward the door. Kody stood stiff, his arms crossed, his glare unyielding. He didn't reach for her. He didn't call her back. He didn't even flinch as the sound of the door creaked open. That silence, his refusal to act, was louder than any outburst. When the door finally closed behind Aurora, it wasn't just a door shutting. It was the collapse of everything fragile left in their family bond. Kody left alone in his pride. Robyn fell to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "What have you done, Kody?" she wailed, her voice raw with anguish. But Kody, rather than crumbling under the weight of his decision, turned away. His pride, his need for dominance, outweighed his love. And in that pride, he became more isolated than ever before. The man who once claimed to be the patriarch of unity was now the architect of division. Aurora's departure wasn't just a rebellion, it was a declaration that his control had limits. And as the echo of her absence lingered in the house, Kody was forced to face a truth he had spent years denying. His family was slipping away, one child at a time. The ripple effect on the other children for Aurora's siblings, the scene was unforgettable. They had watched their father choose control over compassion, power over love. And in that moment, many of them made silent promises to themselves, never to let Kody's approval dictate their worth, never to live shackled by fear of rejection. The children's hearts were heavy, but within that heaviness was a newfound resolve. Aurora's courage became their inspiration. Her walk out of that door was not just her fight for independence, it was the spark that would ignite change in the family. A father's fury turns to silence. Kody's voice, once filled with anger, began to fade into something darker, silence. The kind of silence that weighed heavier than any words ever could. After throwing Aurora out, he sat alone in the living room, replaying everything in his mind. The house that once echoed with laughter, family meetings, and hopeful dreams now stood still. His hands trembled as he realized something profound. He wasn't just losing his children one by one, he was actively pushing them away. But instead of reaching out, instead of softening, Kody hardened his heart. His pride built walls higher than ever before, walls that even Aurora's tears couldn't break down. Aurora's world collapses for Aurora, this moment was shattering. To be cast out by the father she once believed loved her unconditionally was a wound deeper than words could capture. She walked away with trembling steps, not just leaving a house but leaving behind the illusion of safety, trust, and family unity. Her siblings gathered around her in quiet disbelief. Some tried to console her, others stood frozen, realizing this wasn't just about Aurora dating, it was about control, favoritism, and years of hidden tension that had finally exploded. Robyn's unraveling. Robyn stood at the center of the storm, her emotions spiraling. She had begged Kody to reconsider, begged him not to let his pride destroy yet another bond. But deep down, Robyn also knew this was the monster she had helped create. For years she had fed into Kody's favoritism, his need to feel worshipped, his resentment toward the older kids. Now, watching Aurora suffer the same rejection that Gabe, Garrison, and others had faced, Robyn broke. She sobbed not only as a mother, but as a woman who realized too late that the family she tried to hold together was already gone. The children take a stand one by one, the children began speaking up. Gabe, his voice still heavy with grief from past rejections, said coldly, "Now you know what it feels like, Aurora. This is who Dad is." Savannah whispered through tears, "We're all disposable to him, aren't we?" Even Dayton, who had always been closer to Kody, struggled to defend him. He stood silent, torn between loyalty to his father figure and love for his sisters. The truth could no longer be denied. Kody wasn't just losing his wives, he was losing his children's respect. The cracks in Kody's armor. For the first time, Kody's mask slipped. Alone, away from the cameras and the chaos, he admitted to himself that he was afraid, not of losing control, but of facing the reflection in the mirror. What he saw wasn't the strong patriarch he once believed himself to be. What stared back was a man broken by his own choices, abandoned by the family he swore to lead. Yet even with this realization, his pride screamed louder. Instead of reconciliation, he doubled down, convincing himself Aurora had betrayed him by choosing independence over obedience. The family divides further. Christine, Janelle, and Mary, though no longer in the marriage, couldn't ignore what had happened. They heard about Aurora's rejection through whispers and phone calls, and each of them reacted with both sorrow and grim recognition. Christine shook her head, saying, "He hasn't changed. He'll keep repeating the cycle until no one's left." Janelle, strong but weary, added, "I used to think he'd wake up. But this is who he is now." And Mary, who had been discarded long before, spoke quietly, "I know that pain. Aurora will carry this scar for the rest of her life." Their words weren't just observations. They were warnings. The fans react outside the Brown household, the world was watching. Fans who once adored the sister-wives story of love and unity were now outraged. Social media erupted. How could a father throw his own daughter out just for dating? This is abuse of power. Aurora deserves freedom and happiness. Kody's control is destroying everyone. Robyn always thought her kids were safe from Kody's wrath. Now she knows none of them are. The cracks in Kody's public image widened, and his downfall became more visible than ever. Aurora's strength emerges, and yet, from this devastation came a spark. Aurora, though heartbroken, found herself surrounded by siblings, mothers, and friends who stood by her. For the first time, she began to see the truth that love wasn't supposed to be conditional, wasn't supposed to be tied to obedience. Her voice, once soft and submissive, began to carry strength. "If being loved means losing myself, then I don't want it. I'll build my own life, even if Dad isn't in it." Those words carried through the family like a warning bell, signaling a shift. Aurora wasn't just leaving the house, she was leaving behind the control, the manipulation, and the cycle of fear. The shattered bond. A father's rage turns into silence after the storm of anger that erupted inside the Brown household. The atmosphere shifted into something far darker, a silence that suffocated everyone under that roof. Kody had thrown Aurora out with words no child should ever hear from a father figure. His anger was volcanic, but what came after was even worse, the cold absence of love, of care, of compassion. Aurora, who once clung to Kody's approval as if it were the oxygen that kept her alive, now found herself gasping for air in a world where the man she had called father treated her like a stranger. Aurora's painful realization. For Aurora, the weight of that rejection hit harder than any punishment. She began to realize that Kody's love had always come with conditions. Obedience, loyalty, and control were the true requirements, not trust, not support, not unconditional love. And in that moment of rejection, she finally saw her father not as a protector, but as a man consumed by pride, fear, and control. The tears she cried that night weren't just for being cast out, they were for the years she had lost, the loyalty she had given, and the truth she could no longer ignore. Robyn's crumbling authority. Robyn, who had always positioned herself as the protector of her children, now faced the collapse of that role. She had promised Aurora stability, promised her that Kody would be the father who never abandoned her. But those promises lay shattered on the floor the moment Kody's rage turned on Aurora. Robyn's image as the ultimate mother figure, the glue of the family, began to fracture. Even her own children started to question, if she couldn't protect Aurora from Kody, then what was the point of her sacrifices? The children began to whisper behind closed doors. The other kids began whispering to one another, voices low but hearts heavy. They had seen favoritism before, they had lived with it for years. But this? This was proof that even Robyn's children weren't safe anymore. It wasn't just Janelle's kids, Christine's kids, or Mary's abandonment stories anymore. It had now reached Robyn's household, the one Kody had sworn to prioritize.